Hello everybody, here is the Purely guy. I thought that making this video would help a lot of people. I've given a bit of thought about the deck and what the ban list implies for us and what cards might be good to play in next format that we're not playing at the moment. And what could be good techs for uprising problems that we might encounter, such as the barrier. There can be only one in case of Vanquish Soul, and just floodgates in general. Um, and I think that a lot of these texts might help us, or the tips that I'm gonna be giving might help you guys build the deck for the Nationals Euros format. And let's get right into it. The first card I want to talk about is basically Castero Fenrir. This card hasn't seen much play into purely decks. It was a bit worse as well since Draw was such a big part of the format since Super Heavy was one of the better decks, and if left unchecked, it would be very hard to stop. And Draw was almost in every main deck for the largest part of the format pre-ban list. It wasn't in the last week, I would say, or last weekend of the previous ban list where we had three delicious. So it might have been already a good card for those events, such as Dutch Nationals, which I attended. But I want to talk more about the card because I think it's great in our deck at the moment. It offers us more interruptions and interactions with the opponent in their turn. It is a great card since it replaces itself after we play it, and it can be a good target for basically activating Happy Memory, which sometimes we're forced into go into main phase since we need a card in order to activate that card. And what I really like about it is that it helps us out floodgates, such as there can be only one, and it offers us a lot of pushing power, especially through the barrier. As if we're able to crack the board of the opponent with our non-engine, we can rely on Fenrir to stop our opponent next turn. What I really like about the card as well is the deck kind of has a problem if we lose the resource looping because they use board breakers or they outhour my friend or we needed to dump our whole hand into making our game one board. It can help us have a very strong follow up for next turn, and as it is going to be able to search another copy of Fenrir next turn. And it can really help us break boards that will be up next format, which I think is very important for the deck as with the loss of Delicious, we cannot rely of recurring resources from our graveyard as easily in our turn. And I think playing cards that do a lot on themselves is very important for us. So I definitely advise people to play this card in their Purely deck. The next card I want to talk about is Dimension Shifter. Um, I played this card in my side deck for Dutch Nationals. The main reasons were against a lot of decks, it would simplify their board and it would be much easier to go for either a Zeus line or a Happiness OTK through Shifter. And with the fact that now most of the quick plays that we are sent to the graveyard are lost anyways, unless our opponent outs our XYZ next turn, Shifter kind of becomes a bit less bad for us to grind with, as we wouldn't be able to recur those cards unless we have My Friend or Delicious access. So I think it's a very good card. It can help us against some of the harder matchups that we had, such as, for example, Mathmech, Branded, and other decks that rely on the graveyard. What I really like about it, for example, against Branded, is that when they used to go for the puppet lock, if they wanted to try to do that and survive, we would be of course not playing because it would summon the lock, but their end board would be much less oppressive in general, and it would be much harder for them to kill us, and their follow up would be much worse as well. And this made it so I considered a great card. I also played it for Super Heavy specifically, as this paired with a card that outs Baguska also gives us a Zeus line, and we can out their scales and everything. Um, and that was actually really good and came up during nationals. So I think it's definitely a great card we should take into consideration, especially for when we're going second, and it might really have a big impact on some of the matchups that we might play against that rely a lot on the graveyard, such as, for example, Dragon Link. It's not as good against Swarso. It's still great against the branded deck, as they cannot pop a lock us anymore, basically, since the only way they have to do so is Sanctifier. But it also limits their follow up by a lot and their interruptions, as they cannot use Branded in Red, they cannot use the Banish of Mirror Jade, and we're a bit freer to break their board and just it cripples their end board by a lot. The next package I wanted to talk about are the dangers. These serve a bit of a similar function compared to Darkhold, but what I like about them is that they can provide us with link climbing tools, and of course, Bigfoot can out floodgates as well. Um, and overall, they might also give us access to Chaos Angel as a package, which is cool as well. I would definitely probably play 3 Nessie, 1 Jack, and 1 Bigfoot, as that is probably the best ratios we can play at the moment. The next package I want to talk about is Darkhold. Of course, it was very played at the start of the the developments of Purrely post Sayak, and mainly we used to play Snow and Brow. But with a raise up in of the bear in a lot of decks, I definitely think the big Dark World package can be good, as they provide us a lot of ways into link climbing and just putting up big bodies on the board that can kill the opponent board, and afterwards we might be able to set up a couple of interruptions. Of course, Grapha Pop is still insane, and Rainbow plus Silva are technically infinite discards, as long as we can uh, keep sending Rainbow to the graveyard by link climbing, for example, or using it as cost for pretty memory effect. Secondly, I wanted to talk about just spells or board breakers and backer removal in general. Depending on how common anti spell is in decks, I would advise playing more copies of Cosmic. Of course, Fenrir helps against that a lot as well, and we can still, for example, if we don't open Fenrir, play in draw phase and summon a lot of our guys in draw phase. But that still doesn't solve the issue of anti-spell, which is that if they back up their anti-spell with a couple of negates, our only solution will be maybe to go into a Zeus line afterwards with our negated Purrelys. And that isn't optimal, as we will be discarding or using up to four or more cards in order to try to play, pretty much. And this card is of course also great against Runic. Cosmic on Fountain is the perfect response. But I also want to talk about more like generic and strong board breakers, such as Dark Ruler, Storm, and Duster. As I mentioned before, playing cards that do a lot on their own is very important for us post Banlist, as our resource recovery is much worse in our own turn, and we need to kind of rely on the opponent killing our things in order to gain hand size again, as well as draws of Sleepy Memory. So it's very important when we're going second that we have cards that deal with multiple negates, or that can simplify the game state so that our deck can shine more and we have more access to happiness searches, and we can go from there. So Dark Ruler, I would definitely play this. It cripples most end boards, and it can help us play. It's very good against Sprite, which I think might be one of the better decks post ban list, and it's still pretty much good against every deck. And with the fact that Delicious Memories at 1 now, a lot of the OTK lines we used to have are not there anymore, so we're gonna rely much more on Zeus, and this paired with Zeus is very strong. Duster was pretty much the MVP of my nationals bubble. Um, Weirdly enough, I didn't play against any casteros, but I played a lot of labyrinth. And some other matchups in which it came in clutch. I think I drew it about 4 to 5 times in the whole tournament. And paired with Storm was probably what outperformed the most. And I cannot stress about how good these two cards are in our deck, and I think they must be in every list we have, either in the main deck or side deck, depending on if you play more going first or going second heavy or more flexible list. But Duster is probably never gonna leave my main deck anytime soon, as it's really good, unless more combo heavy format is gonna be there. But it really helps clearing extra interruptions such as Imperm or things like a share play such as Econ, Book of Moons, Book of Eclipse, or anything that the opponent might have set. And we really struggle against those kind of interruptions as they're unknown, so we do not know what they are, and they might be game winning for the opponent. The next cards I want to talk about, of course, talents and trust. Those are very strong talents, especially since it's good at both going first and second, and trust as well, by providing us with trap access. If Most of the time we will only be able to set one if we're using it going first, as Gamma is out of the format pretty much after it got hit. But it will still sell leap, which is very good in my opinion. Or we can set other traps such as Imperm or post side. It's things like D barrier that are very good. I think those cards are also in the same category of cards that do a lot. And we need to play cards that do a lot, and I think those are very good. And supporting the other cards we play, such as board breakers and Fenrir, possibly, they'll give us a much easier time dealing with the opponent board. Prosperity as well is a great card since it's good at both going first and second, so it's very flexible. It gives us more access to the outs to what the opponent has, depending on whether anti-spell is going to be more in or out of the format. It might become better or worse, of course, but it is still a great card, as illustrated also by Pack and Tinkafum in their latest lists. I It also helps us a lot going first, as post side we can side into flygates such as these two, and it can help us find them. So we basically have a very strong going first place available. One more thing I wanted to talk about is Sleepy Memory. This card is going to be the key of our deck for probably the nearest future, and as well, after Dune is released, it's going to be even more important since it gives us Baby Noir access. But this card is going to be the bread and butter for the deck post ban list, as our playstyle needs to change. We need to play much more into the main phase. I always advise to try to go for a beauty before anything else, before starting to activate any other quick plays, as the access to Delicious and Plump are much harder to have. It is crucial that we manage our resources very well, and that when we use quick plays, they get attached to an XYZ instead of going to the graveyard, as it is going to be much harder to recur them later on. So I think Sleepy is important, and it's one of the quick plays we need to use last post ban list, as we want to be able to attach it and get draws off it. Um, and that's going to grant us more hand traps or more follow up for next turn, which we will need to go on the crackback and maybe OTK or break the board that the opponent has done after they break ours, as the access to Noir we have is much less, considering we don't have as easy access to Plump. So it's important that we preserve our resources, and we get as much of resources out of our quick plays afterwards. Vanity's Fiend and Some Limit needs pretty much no explanation. They were played in, I believe, the list of the person who topped Dutch nationals with Purrely. we had a conversation after the event, as I wanted to just exchange a few words. I always like to talk to other Purely players and see what they're up to. And the person said that they were clutch for them every time they saw either or one of them. If the opponent, of course, didn't have an out for them, it was pretty much game winning. So I definitely think they can find a spot in our side deck, especially if we're playing a going second list. Because I think post ban list, going second becomes much worse, especially if we play against decks that can play the barrier, as this card's pretty much nullifies all of our best plays, such as Happiness, Zeus, and everything. So we want to go first if we have the choice to go first. Even though we might play more cards that help us deal with the barrier or help us play through the barrier and still crack the opponent board, it's still important for us to think about the effect that this card has on our deck and our plays. And I definitely think these cards can help us go first, especially since our board is, well, Noir is much harder to make. Um, or a unaffected noir, I guess. And yeah, that's about it for the video today, guys. I hope that the information I gave you is helpful, and I hope that Purely will top more at Euros or Nationals. I am really excited to see what people will come up. I saw a lot of different concepts, such as tier Purely and other things. I think they're really cool, and I hope that the deck becomes more explored. And we will definitely become tier one meta contender after we get our support in Duelist Nexus. Um, yeah, I wanted to shout out to Henrik Hausinga, which helped me with the list that I played for nationals, and it was really sad I couldn't make it to top cut for the second year in a row. I hope I'll make it next time. But I wanted to also shout out to the my opponent in round six, which was also a Purely player. We played the mirror, and it was a very nice guy. And we exchanged a few words afterwards. It's always nice to meet people that recognize me from the channel or that just want to exchange ideas with the deck. As growing as a community for this deck is very important, since it has a very high ceiling and potential, and depending on the text we play, our result might differ by a lot. And it's always good to have interactions with you guys. With that said, that's everything with the video of today. I hope that it's going to be helpful. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment and I'll try to reply as soon as possible. And have a good one.